and Technology of Gulf Community College.
Ta-da. Thank you. And hello. I was waiting. Some people went to the restroom. It's their problem. So we actually just did a presentation of how we embedded like 3D printing in some of our classes. But this is a little more the story of how we came to do that, and it's still like a work in progress. But we wanted to share because hopefully we're gonna get you excited about using 3D in your classroom. And that's actually pretty much the first slide. I don't know if you want to.
Mark is going to give you the history behind this.
Yeah, so
what
we're on the
is-
Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology at Bronx Community College. And what we try to do is provide professional development to our faculty on subjects that they're interested in and some different types of technology. And this was one of them that was very exciting for us. Albert Robinson, my assistant, he came to me and said, we should do this. He started showing me some things. I got excited. We started working on it. We now have a lab, and we're trying to put together a sound professional development for our faculty. But in order to do that, we've got to start getting some mentors, people that can actually provide the training to our faculty. So this is a new task for us at our center. We've done it in the past, but we haven't done it with me there. So we're trying to get the staff smart on how to use the 3D printers, how to design things, the iteration that goes on with making models better over time, printing structures or creations that survive, that are successful, because not all 3D prints will be successful on the printing bed. So we're trying to bring all that to faculty that are interested in doing this. Somewhere in here.
I don't know. Back first.
No, I guess it's great. Yeah. So we put a call out for mentors or people that were interested in being mentors regarding 3D printing. We got 4 people that were very interested but had basically no background in it, and so we're gonna learn. We spent the summer going over all kinds of models, looking at many kinds of printers, different kinds of filament, the properties of those filaments, just all sorts of stuff. And to be honest, one of the things I think is we probably did a little bit too much of that instead of doing more assignment kinds of tasks. A teacher has an assignment they want to create. How do they do it? How do they describe it to somebody that's going to help them do it?
So this is actually the faculty that we had for the first attempt, which was like started out last summer. And as Mark was saying, we needed to be trained in 3D printing as a mentor, and then prepare a curriculum, hopefully. And there were 2 biology and 1 math participant. We had 1 English person that couldn't do it, but what we found is that one of the first challenges that people think that this is just for sciences. And we're going to try to prove them wrong, unless you're all sciences, in which case we're going to prove it right. No, but it actually does a lot of flexibility, much more than.
And those, can you back for just one second? Those 3 things are really quite different. First, they had to become proficient on the skills of 3D printing. Then, if they hadn't been a mentor before, we had to kind of get them ready for that. And then, in addition to that, write us a syllabus for this pedagogy that we're going to be teaching other faculty. So it's 3 different tasks that they're doing at the same time. So a lot of hat switching. Yes. And just much like you do, when you sit there with your students, you start to empathize what they're going through. So it was difficult for me to empathize what they were going through as far as the 3D printing tasks, and them to describe what they were trying to do in their class to me, but then also recognize what is going on for the students that would be receiving this. There's a lot of that. We had to keep reminding each other what we were talking about and what reference we were talking from.
That was a lot of fun.
So, just like Mark mentioned, so we started our meetings in the beginning of the summer, and the math person, Louis, felt so comfortable because he was using the program Mathematica, right? He said, very similar to the programs that we were using. So initially, Rafi and I struggled because we never used any of these programs, or we never used any of these languages. So all of us actually had to take this training to learn about this program online, and we started working on this in our meetings. So honestly, it was so hard in the beginning because we were trying to understand the terminology and the special techniques. So Rafi and I helped each other a lot. And in the meantime, our math person was printing stuff that looked incredible to us. It looked so difficult for us, it was beyond our abilities. But eventually, we felt more comfortable with the programs.
We got them. But so the initial thing was also, again, like the students learn the language. There was an online training where it's like, you know, okay, this is the filament, this is the way that the printer works. Kind of like you need to know at least a little about what's happening. There are some rules that you need to follow. So, you know, that was already kind of like, oh, okay, it's a different language. And you see, you feel exactly like a student, which is like, I guess, good for your ego. And then in addition to that, we did spend some time with Mark and his team to learn some of the software. And as Seher was saying, and I'm going to show you some picture of the software, pretty much when you see the software and the choices, you're going to gravitate toward the one that makes sense to you. And that's one thing that we learn in our struggle, because we looked at these. I mean, I don't know about Seher. I looked at these and I was like, what?
What are these?
That's not going to be what I'm doing. I don't care what. If that's the only thing that 3D printing is about, then I'm out of here. And
so there are many kinds of software, and they serve different kinds of things. And this one happens to be very math-based or computer programming-based. And we had Louis Ferdinand, who's from the math department. He sucked up
that like a fish to water.
And he started putting in functions and some other things, and he really took to it. But as much as he took to it, we couldn't get him to do any of the other stuff. We couldn't get him to do any of the drafting things or some of the
pedagogical stuff.
Yeah, some of that stuff.
Come up with a
It
lesson
was really a
plan.
hard pull, and he'd admit that. And so that's where we had a little bit of an issue trying to make mentors kind of master of all trades, or not master, but knowledgeable about all trades, jack of all trades.
Be flexible to adapt all three
Right.
areas, yes.
So again, so this very pretty picture, I'm not doing that. Then we saw this. Well, we didn't see this. If I saw this, I was not going to do anything. We saw this. I'm like, oh, I understand that. I think that can be something that I can actually do. So when we were actually training, what Louis was doing, he was working with the other program because he was comfortable. He also has some background in computing, so you know the coding and so on was not a problem for him. And Seher and I were working with Mark, learning about the shapes, how to put them together, how to create things like this. And I even think I don't know if I have it with me. I may have some of the things that we created. We're creating like a little rocket ship.
Yes.
I may have it here. I'll dig through.
In about 45 minutes, I was able to walk them through a bunch of primitives and adding and subtracting from the primitives, and we created a little rocket ship. We created triangles, cylinders, cones, and then put it all together, and it became a rocket ship. And you actually could have put a rocket in there and let it go.
Actually, when you look at the picture, it looks easy, but in fact, it takes time to put them together. Forget about the rocket ship. Just these pieces take a lot of time to put together.
Well, you need some spatial understanding. Like, for example, I do not have it. So if you put things together and you're like, oh, you have to extrude and pull it out and pull it in, it needs to be like concave and convex, like these. And I still was able to do something. I'm just saying there's hope for everyone. But you kind of have to learn. It's like anything else. You need to be able to learn like the basic things. It's like you have to learn Excel, you have to learn Word and a PowerPoint. That's pretty much the same thing. Now, if you are more of an art person, you're like, why? So there's also this program. This is called Sculptris, and I loved it when I saw it. I know I was never going to use it, but it's so much fun. And if you are more of an artist, but not just that, you really can create different things. Literally, you can design. You start from a little ball, and you can create different. Well, they do look like sculpture. They're beautiful. Again, if you have any kind of talent, not me, you can create like beautiful things. But again, just to show you that we always think about it like one of the challenges is that people think about it as just science. But there is a lot of flexibility in the programs that are out there, in the things that you can actually do. And then one of Mark's favorite, and it's much easier, is actually this little pen. So you don't even need to have a printer. Well, actually, you should talk about it because that's your baby.
Well, this is a very intuitive tool, and when we found it, I was very excited about it because how do you get English involved? How do you get, social science involved? Some of the other less STEMmy courses and stuff. And this you print in 3D. The filament gets heated, it starts to extrude, you move your hand, and it cools and hardens, and you can create 3D items. Some of these are done different ways. This one was actually, took masking tape and taped a soda can, and then drew on it using different filaments, and then pulled out the soda can, and then created some ends on the top. So it was a cylinder first, and then some ends, and then just kind of hit it with the pen and welded it together. So there's a bunch of different ways to do these things, but it creates an environment where any subject can basically get involved without much of a turn-up time. You're putting the tool in the student's hands as opposed to the teacher bringing stuff in for the students to use.
And
one more thing to add, actually the beauty of using 3D pen is also for students because we cannot expect our non-STEM students, even STEM students, to learn all that complicated programming to print their own. But if you bring it to the lab or in classrooms, we can basically show them step by step how to do this, such as neuron model. Neuron model will be very easy to draw using the 3D pen in classroom, and the students will understand what part is the axon, what part of the soma, what part is the dendrites, etc. So they could experience this in a living condition, or basically in a working group condition.
And they're going to have an artifact at the end of it. Because yes, this drawing is nice, but literally this, if you draw it and then you remove it from the paper, you do have your little piece of art that is the neuron that you have created. And for your maybe doing something a little more 3D, even if it's not as complex as what you wanted, you can do it like this, and so they have a better idea of the orbitals and how the electrons are moving. Again, this is like much simpler than where you want to go, but it's like one step better than the 2D model that, which was still a 2D model that I just showed you. And I tried to do that actually with the cells, like not the neuron. I gave them Play-Doh so that they could create the cell, and it just takes longer for them to. Oh, that's my prototype for something else.
Yeah,
part of the creative process.
Something like this.
Right. So one thing that I learned from there, doing the cell. So this is still made with Play-Doh. I was thinking maybe I can print out the organelles for them. And actually, this came because Mark sent me something else. I made some slime, and students always have difficulties understanding what the cytoplasm is. So I'm like, hey, I can make slime at home, or ask them to make slime. That can be their cytoplasm. If I print out the organelles, then they can make their own cell. Or maybe we can even, if we keep them 2D, they can draw out the organelles, and I can bring them to the 3D printer and print it out. So there are ways that then you can, again, expand when you start thinking about it. And it doesn't need to be complicated, because again, I made slime with the easiest recipe and the cheapest stuff. I also have a recipe to make Play-Doh if I decide to make Play-Doh, by the way.
And Rafi came up with a great idea using 3D printing. Along with the Play-Doh, make a mold that you take a lump of Play-Doh, put it in there, and then the 3D printed mold, you press it, and then out comes a piece that the students start to use. So that was really a great idea.
So again, there are different ways that you can think, because that actually came about because I'd like to have like a project where they do blood typing, but actually having the red blood cells, because we want them to understand antigen and antibodies is one of the toughest things for them to understand. And we do a blood typing lab, but it's like, you take some liquid, you put it in a container, you add some other liquid. And I'm like, oh, if you print out a bunch of red blood cells, then you need to have something that gets stuck in it. And I'm like, why don't we just make them with Play-Doh? And we can just print out like something. So I don't know how that one is going to work out. Come to Bronx Ed Tech next year, and I'll let you know if it works out. But going back to our struggle, so this was more like the professor creating stuff. We had the struggle going through the programs. And then we actually had to think, as we were going through the struggle, how are we going to mentor people? What are we going to do to create something where we can teach other people what we're learning now? And that's when Sarah comes in, because she's awesome and she knows all about this.
Okay, all right. So as we've been saying, we needed to come up with some game plan for our PD workshop series, and then we basically put some proposal design and rubrics together that I'm going to share with you. I may not have enough, just can pass them around. So this is the proposal design.
We also have pictures.
And then, yeah. Yeah, the pictures, but they're kind of limited. So this is the rubric.
So tell me what you want me to watch.
So yeah, we, as a group, we came up with these so that we could have a coherent way of reporting of the faculty attending the workshop about what their plans are in 3D printing, what kind of activities. If you just look at it, we have areas like what success skills they are looking for in students, like critical thinking, problem solving, self-management, etc. We expect them to write the project summary, expectation of the module. What is the driving question? What do these faculty, mentors, will be expecting from their students to do? And what software they're going to be using, product and skills. Is it going to be an individual work of the student or a teamwork? So they need to identify these. How much time? An attendee in the previous section asked, how do you manage the time that you use in your classroom? So we expect them to report how much time of their classroom will be dedicated for 3D printing and the completion time, if it's basically a student project. And then basically we have the reflection methods for assessment purposes, like are they going to be using journal, learning log, or whole class discussions, surveys, focus groups, fishbowl discussions, or others. So we came up with these. And also we expect them to write their student learning outcomes. We all have student learning outcomes, but this is going to be a different set for using 3D printing. So they need to identify the new learning outcomes in their classrooms for this purpose. And are they going to use any assessments? Is it going to be checkpoints, formative, summative? So they need to identify those as well. And also the final product, are they going to ask their students to present this as a group discussion or a poster or whatever they want to use it in their classrooms? Then we came up with a rubric, which is the second one. So this is for our faculty attending the workshops to fill out. This is for us, for hopefully starting next year, to evaluate, review their paperwork, the form that they will fill out. So by looking at this, comparing it to our rubric, we're going to say, before they start implementing their projects, we're going to say, you need to change these areas because we went through these struggles. It may not work, it may work, maybe you need to extend this to this, or you need to shorten the class time. So we're going to be sharing our experiences and reflect those on the rubrics that we prepare.
And again, this is also because we've seen as we were going through that it's very easy to come up with a great idea and have a design, but then the whole point of this is that you need to apply it in the classroom. That's why you're going through the work. And that's the part that, you know, again, we've been the students on the other side. It kind of sucks. You have to come up with a plan and then you have to use it. So it's kind of like, because it's fun, like to print out this stuff and to do these things. So part of the mentoring is kind of being like the teacher and forcing you to do the assignment. So that was like, you know, all right.
And actually, I want Mark to share the experience during the interview, me and
Yeah. Going back to when we first interviewed,
yes.
One of the questions was, how would you use 3D printing in your classroom? And all of them, they really wanted to have students design things and didn't have didn't grasp the concept that for students to learn how to use the software and then come in and print things and then do it a second time because of all the mistakes the first time, the huge time suck that would be on the course. They'd be learning this instead of whatever the course material really was. So we got to balance that. And this form came out because we were having some difficulties, not only describing what it was we wanted to do, but also some of the parameters. So this is kind of a checklist of thoughts to make sure you're doing things the right way, considerations you may not have thought about, all that sort of stuff. And it puts it in one place so a faculty that's participating in this professional development come to a mentor and say, this is what I want to do, and they're speaking the same language. It also introduces language.
Mm-hmm.
But we also had a struggle towards the end because the math person didn't want to be using this too much. He's too much into printing, not into pedagogical stuff. So we had to find the common ground to work all together.
which is again is part of the fact that we were in the three hats, right? We were the students, but we were also the mentor, and we had to kind of like also distance ourselves from everything. And so that was, we kept on switching around about like, okay, we learned this as a student. We know that we're spending a lot of time, but can we actually, stepping back as a professor, are you actually going to use that in the classroom? So it was interesting. It was an interesting experience. So what we learned from the initial struggle and when we were creating this document is that probably the assignment were going to be either something that the professor created as a model or something that the student created as a model. And we realized that unless you have a specific class, or maybe again someone like Louis that is doing math, and then maybe you want to put in some kind of equation, just gonna say it as if I understand math, I'm lying. And then you can create something from that program. It's way too much work potentially for the student. If you want the student to create something, you need to be very specific about the assignment, and you need to be realistic about the time. So these are just the form that you had the chance to see. But based on that, we came up with what we thought, and we still think at the moment, could be a good curriculum for future PDs. I don't know if you want to go over it, I can go over it. So it was important to have a basic training in the terminology, how the machine works. You need to know a little how things work. You don't need to know everything, but you need to have an understanding. So we thought the first day, we're going to do the basic training. We're going to introduce everybody to the software. Because again, you kind of immediately feel that that's the software that you want to use. And we were like, it makes no sense for someone to go through all three softwares because that's a waste of time. Even just learning one requires a lot of time. So first day, you got an introduction to everything. Then we're going to have like day 2 to 4. Each day, we're going to work on one of the software. So as a person that you're interested, you can come and get a little more specialized on that software and start to think about what do you want to create with it. So you're not wasting too much time, and then you can keep on working. You can keep on working on the thing that you want to work, and someone else can be trained on the other software. And then day 5 is the day where everything comes together, because then we're going to be like, okay, what's your project? Did you write up that SLOs? Do you know what you want to do in the classroom? And we're going to be mentoring a little more in terms of the pedagogical stuff and see if there's something that can actually be implemented during the next semester. Because again, as we've experienced, you are going to try to implement it and you're going to fail, or you're going to learn at least like how to do it better. So, but you want to go in with the being a little smarter than us in terms of what you can actually do. Other things that we learned, because that way we're still very naive at that point. We thought that we already knew everything, but we still didn't learn everything. It's great that you're taking 3D, but if you don't need to use it and you already have something else, don't do it.
Don't force it.
Don't force it. Just because you've taken the PD, try to find the activity that is really meaningful. Just because you know something, you don't have to use it for everything.
The other one, not everybody is tech savvy. Yes, you're going to go through some training on using the programs, but if you don't feel comfortable, there's another option. You may go to the sites like Thingiverse and get the program and forward it to Mark or your person, and they can print it for you. So you're not expected to be an expert on how to use this program and write your own codes to come up with the model. So there is a flexibility, because some people will shy away. Oh, I'm not tech savvy. I don't know how to use any of the programs, so this is not for me. No, it is for everyone as long as you're curious and willing to research, such as Thingiverse is an option where you can go and just look at the models that you may use.
There are like things that people already created. Again, you don't have to recreate, like rediscover hot water, but you can also take that as the basis. Maybe someone created something, it's not exactly what you want, but you can take that as the basis to create what you want. And that brings me to this part, and I can take out I don't know who was here before, my atoms, like, again, so what I did for the people that were not here, I actually made like 3D models of atoms for the students to work with. And this was an iteration. I don't know who was here before. I don't know if you want to pass it around. I have more if you want to see it. And this was a lot of work between Mark and I. So there are people that are expert and better, at least for us. We do have actually people that know how to work the machine, know how to work out the kinks, some of the technical things or the thing that may not work. They may not know what your topic is, but you can go back and forth and work with them. So this is an iteration in terms of like, Mark, I think it's just like, he can hear me coming down the hallway and be like, oh my gosh, she's back again with like more questions. We spend a lot of time on the board because it's like, this is what you want to do? And I'll be like, no, this is my design. It's like, well, that's not gonna work. What do you really want to do? So it was a lot of back and forth, and even after the design, we want to improve it, we want to change it once we test it in the classroom. So, you know, that's something also that we learn. You're probably not going to have your final product like any other lesson plan that you ever have in your class. You're always improving, and you have people that will support. I think that she's gonna. Okay.
I can mention something real quick here. From a center that teaches gets involved in professional development for faculty, there was probably too much of me talking about some of the background stuff, some of the, you know, like I said, the printers, and just getting into some of that minutia. I thought it was important for them to know so that they could answer questions for their own faculty. But it's akin to if we're trying to have somebody create an assignment for writing, you don't have to tell them about the Xerox printer and what colors it comes out.
Or they learn how to make paper first.
Right, or that, you know, you just have to tell them about how to write paragraphs and things like that. And that's probably where we should have started, getting their hands on the keyboard, having them do some things, and then see what comes out on the other side.
So she's probably gonna kill me because of the time, so I'm gonna kind of like run through, and just because I told you it's not just about science, we wanted to bring you some example of things that you can do with your student if you're not a science teacher. This is actually someone that was studying enslaved tribes, and they have specific artifacts that the student cannot have access to, and so they printed them out. So if you are a history professor or so on, and you know your students will not have access to artifacts, you can actually print them out. A lot of the museums are actually scanning them. You can have little games where someone is going to print out something, brings it to class, and everybody else has to figure out what was it used for. Similarly, there was a teacher, and I thought that this was fun. They were studying ancient societies, and they're like, okay, come up with a chessboard with all the different important figures in that specific society. If you are a geography, sociology, you can ask your students to print out a space that they want. It may be their neighborhood, it can be the college, it can even be their own personal space. So there are different ways that you can actually approach this. Well, if you teach geography, you can also print out 3D maps that you can actually print out. And the last thing I promised before she shoots me, and this should be marked because this is a real thing that someone did at BCC.
So we have a teacher, Sheldon Skaggs, who goes to Belize every year, who gets involved with the students on these digs. And they dug up this artifact on the left. It's made of jade, and it's a pendant that hangs around the neck. He wasn't able to bring it home because there's rules against that. So he had to turn it into the country. But he took enough pictures of it that we were able to create a three-dimensional model of it, and that's what you see here. From that, I was able to print it in a clear resin, and that's what you see on the right. So he's able to paint that or do whatever he wants to it, and even though he may not be able to take those students to Belize, he can show them that in real size and really good representation.
Ta-da!
And I'm going to say one more thing, the last sentence. Actually, the aim, as we discussed earlier, the aim of the initiative of 3D printing in BCC is not to train software users or developers. Our aim is to introduce 3D as an active learning tool in every field, not just STEM. So this is what our aim is in the next few years.
Yeah, pick and choose.
Yes.
And again, you can be creative. Sorry. You can clap.
I meant to clap and you were like, what?
I thought you were asking a question. You should always override me.
The article that's being passed around was kind of a compilation of last summer. We have a magazine in our OA department, and so I put that together, and it kind of sums up a little bit of what we were all talking about here and what it was from the center's point of view on how to produce a bit of professional development. There's some pictures in there that kind of help you out.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sounds really challenging. How did you, I like what you said about getting away from the technology and focusing on that and looking more towards use. How long did it take you to figure out that?